Midlands seeing a little bit of showery rain through the morning into the afternoon. The low clouds across the far north will burn back to the coast. Brightest skies Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, the West Country seeing some fine conditions as well. But if you catch that wind, it's going to feel cold, particularly on this east coast. So here temperatures typically around 14, 15 degrees Celsius. Further west, we'll see a 16 to 18 Celsius. Now, through Saturday evening and overnight, we watch as some showers towards the near continent migrate towards the southeast of England and then push further west. So you may see a little bit of wet weather as we enter Sunday. But Sunday will be fair for most. Some sunshine, still that nagging wind, more cloud on Monday, a few showers towards the south. But the key feature of the weather over the next few days will be it will turn cooler. Certainly you'll feel the difference through the beginning of next week. Bye-bye.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's 1 o'clock and welcome to On the Money, where we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you beat the squeeze. I'm Liam Halligan, and for the next hour, we'll be talking about falling retail sales as the cost of living crisis continues to bite, with online sales hit particularly hard. But we hear from one UK retailing legend who says the UK high street has its best days to come. Plus, we're talking house buying and renting and asking that question: are all landlords bad? But first, it's the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
Thank you, Liam. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 1. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Here are your top stories. Boris Johnson says he's sure he'll still be Prime Minister later this year. That's despite fresh criticism from senior members of his own party. Speaking this morning, Mr Johnson added that the public want the government to get on and focus on other issues. That, as Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood said, there's an absence of discipline, focus and leadership in Downing Street. Last night, MPs ordered an investigation into whether the Prime Minister misled Parliament over COVID breaches. Shadow Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Peter Kyle, told GB News the Partygate scandals revealed Mr Johnson's true self.
Lost his authority because he couldn't even get his own MPs to support him yesterday. The police have fined him. He has a criminal sanction against him. What this whole Partygate debacle has exposed is Boris Johnson's character flaws. He is reckless, he's untrustworthy, and he lies, and he is incompetent.
Boris Johnson says a new partnership agreed with India will enable the country to strengthen its own defence industry. The Prime Minister is currently in New Delhi for talks with his Indian counterpart Narendra Modi. As part of the New Deal, Boris Johnson's pledged to support India's goal of building its own fighter jets to reduce expensive imports of military equipment. Mr Johnson said the two leaders had told negotiators working on a post-Brexit trade deal to get it done by Diwali in October. The United Nations is warning the number of civilians killed in Ukraine is going to be much higher as the horrors inflicted in areas of intense fighting come to light. The organisation added there's growing evidence of war crimes and said Russian troops have indiscriminately bombed populated areas, killing civilians and wrecking hospitals. This as Boris Johnson announced the British embassy in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, will reopen next week. Earlier, the mayor of Mariupol appealed for a full evacuation of the besieged Ukrainian city after the Russian president claimed it's now controlled by his forces.
There are still 100,000 people in this city who, for the second day in a row, are waiting for evacuation. And they give us just such a tiny number of buses. Like it was yesterday, they said there would be 90 buses, but only 7 arrived.
The World Bank estimates the war in Ukraine has caused $60 billion worth of damage to buildings. David Malpass, the organisation's president, made the comments during a conference in the US. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky also spoke at the conference. He said his country needs $7 billion a month to make up for economic losses.
The funds from the war tax should be used to help Ukraine, to rebuild everything that Russia has destroyed in the war. And if this tax is applied to other aggressors, the funds should be directed to the victims of the war. Every country in the world needs to prepare now for the possible complete severance of relations with Russia. No one should depend on the political whims of the leaders of that country.
A German national linked to the disappearance of Madeleine McCann has been identified as a formal suspect by Portuguese authorities. Officers haven't named the individual. In 2020, German police said they were investigating a man known as Christian B. in connection with the disappearance of the 3-year-old in Praia da Luz in May 2007. In France, Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen are out on their last day of campaigning ahead of the presidential vote on Sunday. Our reporter Paul Hawkins is in Paris for us. Paul, what's the feeling among the voters where you are?
Well, here in Paris, Rhiannon, 35% of the electorate in the first round voted for Emmanuel Macron. 30% voted for the far-left candidate, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who came third overall in the country, which is why he isn't in the final round of the election. Marine Le Pen only polled 5% in the capital. So the big question here is, speaking to Mélenchon voters, will they vote reluctantly for Emmanuel Macron on Sunday? Some are saying that they haven't decided. Others are saying that they'll reluctantly vote for Emmanuel Macron, even though they don't want to, because his attitude is fiscally right-wing, it's pro-business, he wants to raise the pension age to 65. But it is the last day of campaigning. Marine Le Pen has been out in northern France, in Pas-de-Calais, and her message to voters there was the straight choices between Macron or France.
Paul, thank you. Paul Hawkins there for us, and he'll be keeping us up to date throughout the day. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's return to Liam and On the Money.
And that was Rhiannon Jones. Coming up on The Money today, UK retail sales fell last month as people pulled in their purse strings as the cost of living squeeze got tighter. We'll hold a detailed discussion with views from the retailing front line. Plus, rental costs are soaring with demand for properties at an all-time high. We'll be hearing from the National Residential Landlords Association, which represents almost 100,000 landlords across England and Wales. And each day On The Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview with a business leader or policymaker. Today, we're hearing from retailing legend Bill Grimsey. Having worked his way up from butcher's boy to the boss of retailing giants like Iceland and Wix, he knows a bit about the shopping business, does Bill? And he insists the UK high street is far from dead. We just need to rethink it. That's later in the show. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. What do you think of the issues raised in today's On the Money? How do they impact you? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. Stay with us, because this is GB News on TV, DAB+, digital radio and online. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're on the money. UK retail sales dropped sharply in March as the rising cost of living hit consumer spending. That's according to official data out today. The volume of retail sales fell far more than predicted, with online sales hit particularly hard as consumers reined in discretionary spending on luxuries and other non-essential items. Why? Because as the prices of food and fuel have skyrocketed, buying the basics now takes up an ever-rising share of household incomes. Retail sales in the UK fell no less than 1.4% in March compared to the previous month, and within that total, online sales were hit particularly hard, falling 7.9% compared to February, as consumers tightened their belts. These downbeat numbers are a clear sign high inflation is now translating into a serious economic slowdown. And as the cost of living squeeze gets tighter, household energy bills rising in April and tax rises kicking in, retail sales are likely to fall even more. Separate data out today from the research company GfK suggests that while retail sales fell in March, so far in April, consumer confidence has plunged even more to its lowest level since the 2008 financial crisis. I guess one bit of good news, for those with a mortgage anyway, is that because of this retail slowdown and consumer confidence nosedive, the Bank of England, which increased interest rates from 0.5 to 0.75% last month, may hesitate before pushing up rates more. The question remains, though, UK retail sale volumes are falling sharply and they're set to go down further. And that's our On the Money question today. How can the UK reverse this slump in retail sales? Grown-up conversations with people who know their stuff as ever here on The Money, and I'm talking today to the retail expert Kate Hardcastle. She's joining us from the US. Great to have you with us, Kate, as ever. And there's another Kate, the CEO of UK Hospitality. That's Kate Nichols, returning to On the Money. And in the studio, Jasmine Birtles, our very own MissMoneyMagpie.com. Here she is. An expert, a doyen of all consumer and personal finance issues. Welcome to you all. Let's talk to you first, Kate Hardcastle, if we may. Are you surprised that UK retail sales actually fell in March compared to February, and fell as much as they did?
I'm not surprised, and hello to everyone on the panel. I think it's very important to understand that we buy emotionally, and it makes complete sense, therefore, that if consumers are concerned about the way that their finances are going, they're going to make methodical steps in terms of trying to rein it back in. It doesn't mean that the end is nigh. Of course, we will start to see times again when consumers feel confident and will start to spend, but very much the focus is about the cost of living. Every headline was about the fuel crisis, the clarity was at the petrol pumps, the clarity was at the bills coming through the door. And we have to understand that as retail and hospitality and any service element that gives to the consumer an offer of goods or services, it has to understand that. It has to fluctuate with what consumers want, and you have to appeal to the appetite at that specific time. So if consumers want value, that's what you need to talk about. And if consumers want to feel that they're having a good time and they want some luxury, you have to appeal in that way too. So it makes good sense. That's the way that the retail revolution's always gone.
Let's turn to Kate Nichols, who is the CEO of UK Hospitality. Kate, I'm just looking at the fine print of this ONS, Office for National Statistics data. It shows that food store sales were down 1.1% and spending on alcoholic drinks in stores and supermarkets shrank by 11.3%. But that's partly because, or you can tell me if I'm wrong, spending on food in pubs is going up, spending on alcohol in pubs is going up, and hotels and other hospitality venues. Is that what you're seeing or not?
I think you are seeing some of that in March. January, February time, we know is the time that customers don't tend to go out to hospitality. People do tend to stay at home. But March, they start to come out. The weather gets better. People do go out and socialise again. So I think some of the trend you're seeing, you're absolutely right. In the March figures, you are seeing a transfer of spend across into hospitality. It's a slight uptick in hospitality numbers and footfall. It is still well below 2019 levels in terms of volume and footfall into hospitality, but there is some transfer. I think what you are seeing here, though, and any anticipated slump that we got in retail sales to take account of that change, this is a far bigger slump than was being forecast. So people were anticipating you would see possibly 0.3, 0.5% slump in retail sales as some of the online experiences moved to be in-person experiences in hospitality. This is a much bigger slump that talks about a hit to consumer confidence, suggests that there is greater fragility, and suggests that that discretionary spending on which our economic recovery depends is quite fragile, and that we may see that being translated through into lower hospitality sales as we go forward in April, May, and the cost of living really starts to bite.
Indeed, it is a bigger slump than we thought. Just to repeat the numbers for those joining us in the last few minutes, UK retail sale volumes fell 1.4% in March, and online sales were down 7.9%, less what we call discretionary spending on non-essentials, because the cost of essentials themselves are going up so much, not least fuel and food. Jasmine, you run moneymagpie.com. You deal with queries from an awful lot of consumers, shoppers, spenders. Were you surprised by this number to the extent that I was?
I wasn't, to be honest, because, what we're hearing all the time is that people are very worried, as Kate Hardcastle pointed out. There's, it's an emotional spend, but it's also pounds and pence, because when you've seen your energy bill more than double, when it costs you more than £100 to fill your car with petrol, that actually makes you think, I really have to rein back my spending, because these actual numbers are far bigger than I've had before. And also, of course, we do know already that people are using buy now, pay later schemes to just buy the basics. And we've had news from Nationwide that credit card spending is up again on the basics. So, as we've heard, the discretionary spend, which our economy rests on, is pretty fragile at the moment, because people literally don't have the money. Either they think they don't, or they actually don't have the money to spend on fun stuff.
Back to Kate Hardcastle, who is joining us from the US. Kate, I think it's worth saying that these are March numbers. So Russia invaded Ukraine on the 24th of February. So in March, we already had higher food prices, higher fuel prices, and so on. But what we didn't have in March was the increase in household utility bills, which Jasmine just mentioned, which only happened in April. So with the best will in the world, while we don't want to be too alarmist here, it strikes me that these March numbers are not going to be improved upon in April, and the April consumer confidence numbers, which came out from GfK today, would seem to bear that out.
I think we've got to be realistic that there's going to be perhaps a little bit more buoyancy in that confidence over the summer months. And one of the key drivers to that is the fact that surely the weather might change. And when the weather changes, people won't feel the need to hit the heating buttons in the house. They'll be trying to enjoy some of the summer. People have had 2 years now plus of restricted times to meet families, take holidays, go on day trips, etc. And quite rightly, people who can afford that will still want that in their lives. My biggest concern, and I was down at the Ideal Home Show for a month in March talking to the public about this day in, day out, how were they feeling, what were they doing to make those changes? And they were being very savvy and very knowledgeable about those small changes you can make, turning the thermostat down a little bit, trying to make provisions, buying more tin goods in the food shop, etc. But the reality is, my biggest fear is autumn, Liam. That's really when we're going to feel the pinch once again, because we're going to see that fuel cap really start to impact families. We're going to see families trying to adjust any spending they've had over the summer period. facing into the Christmas period, which is always a pressurised spend. And the reality is we've got a lot of hard-pressed households already using food banks more than ever before. I was at a food bank recently talking about how their own volunteers were supplementing the foods and goods there out of their own pocket because they just couldn't meet demand. The reality is we are in a real crunch situation. The impact that will always have on retail and hospitality is that people are sensible. They will do what they can for their own families, their own households to get in control of that. There is support that is required and needed. But I think without sounding alarmist or doomsdayers, yes, I think we probably are yet to see the real impact, which is going to come later in the autumn.
Well, Kate Hardcastle, you're going to leave us now. Enjoy the rest of your time in the US. We look forward to seeing you back in the UK soon. We're going to carry on this discussion over the break. How can we rescue this slump in UK retail sales? We've got Kate Nichols, the CEO of UK Hospitality, Jasmine Birtles in the studio. More guests will be joining us after the break. So stay with us. You're on the money.
Hello there. Welcome to your weather update from the Met Office. I'm Claire Nazir. Here are your headlines through the rest of today. Still that nagging easterly wind, a few showers lurking around. Brightest skies will be towards the north. We're stuck between high pressure across Iceland and low pressure lurking across Iberia as well as France. A squeeze on the isobars, meaning we're seeing that easterly wind come in over a cool sea, hence the reason why it's going to feel cool yet again along this east coast. More clouds across central and southern parts of England and Wales through the afternoon. A few showers here. More low cloud burning back to the coast across the northeast of Scotland. But in between, it's fine. It's dry with some lovely sunshine. Highest temperatures the western side of the country coming in around 17 or 18 degrees Celsius. Now, through this evening and overnight, not a lot of change. This cloud tends to fade away towards more southern areas. More cloud then comes in across Northumberland, Pennine districts, as well as the Midlands, southeast Scotland. And that low cloud, that hard, continues to affect the far northeast of Scotland. A mostly dry night, but one or two spits and spots can't be ruled out where that cloud is thick enough, and temperatures holding up because of the wind. So the weekend looks like this. A rather cloudy start for some. Again, a few showers where that cloud slowly develops and becomes thicker. But towards the west, brighter skies, certainly for Northern Ireland and Western Scotland. And we will see the cloud break up through the afternoon, allowing some sunshine. The winds are still very brisk coming in from the east-northeast. Temperatures typically coming in around 17 or 18 further west, further east, 12 to 14 degrees Celsius. It's a similar situation through Saturday and into Sunday. Again, we're chasing cloud, temperatures just about holding up. And again, that wind will be strong at times. So here's your outlook through the next few days. Sunday's looking mostly fine with some sunshine. Monday more in the way of clouds, but the temperatures will slowly decline as we head through next week. I'll see you later. Bye-bye for now.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 1:22. You're on the money. Now, UK retail sales dropped sharply in March as the rising cost of living hit consumer spending. We've had a 1.6% fall in retail sales and a 7.9% fall in online sales in March compared to the month before. So we're discussing how can we reverse that slump. Joining me now, I'm delighted to say we have Nathan Mills, who's the owner of The Butchery. Nathan oversees and runs a number of butchers' outlets across the capital here in London. Nathan, I'm really great to have you here on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really interested to talk to a butcher because it strikes me that, you know, people see meat as a necessity, but they might be asking for different cuts. They might be buying cheaper meats. They might be cutting their cloth according to their budget. What are you seeing as you're serving people in your various butcher outlets day to day?
There is a definite trend where people are watching what they are spending at the moment. People are really questioning every item. They are going for cheaper cuts. I think 10 years ago we opened in a recession, and that was when we see all the cheap cuts selling really quickly. And we've reverted back to that point now. But it's hard. It's hard at the moment. We're seeing a lot less foot traffic in through the stores at the moment, and we're back to sort of pre-pandemic price sort of sales. We have price increases.
So it's less beef Wellington and a bit more scrag end, Nathan, that's going on. Are we seeing the return of interest in those cheaper cuts? Do you think this will change the way we eat meat? Do you think we'll eat less meat? Of course, that's been a trend over recent years. Could that trend accelerate?
There's been a sort of an impact there where it's environmental pressures, and now you've got this crisis that we're in at the moment. Yes, people are trying to eat less meat, but better quality meat, and that's where we sort of fit in. The cheaper cuts, yes, definitely, they're selling a lot quicker than your high-end beef Wellington cuts.
Very, very interesting. Now, Kate Nichols, thanks for staying with us. You're the CEO of UK Hospitality. Of course, pubs, restaurants, hotels are an important part of many, many high streets across the UK. And your sector in particular has been hit, hasn't it, by these tax rises because you were on a 5% rate of VAT at the height of the pandemic, then a 12.5% emergency rate of VAT in recent months. But in April again, after these March numbers, in April again, your sector went back to full fat 20% VAT. What is the impact of that you're hearing from your members?
Well, we had a number of issues that changed. You had the VAT rate go up, you had business rates kick back in for our members, and then as a result of what was happening in Ukraine and the supply chain issues, you had really significant energy price bill increases for hospitality businesses, 150, 200% coming through, 30 to 50% increases coming through on much of our food. So you've had a big problem that's hit those businesses. They've got a cost of doing business crisis at the same time as their customers have got a cost of living crisis. So what our members are telling us is that they're having to put up prices to customers, often double-digit price increases, which obviously just deters customers from coming out, means that they buy less. So our revenues may be back up to 2019 levels, but footfall and sales volumes are down substantially. So in real terms, our members are sort of wading through treacle as they try and recover. And these are inflationary cost headwinds, which are just resulting in a turn-off in discretionary spend. So we fear that while you're seeing this in March retail figures on the high street, you will see it in April, May, June figures in hospitality. You will see consumer confidence fall, and you'll see discretionary spend turn off. And therefore, you will see an economic downturn in the high street more generally, just at a time when these businesses need to start getting moving again to get the economy moving.
One silver lining in this montage of clouds, Jasmine, may be if you've got a mortgage, the Bank of England might not raise interest rates as much as it was going to. We're still expecting an interest rate rise in the coming weeks from 0.75%, perhaps only to 1%, not to 1.25%. I mean, inflation is 4 times the Bank of England's 2% target.
Yeah.
They have to raise rates to retain any kind of inflation-fighting credibility, I would say, and yet they might ease off a little bit in terms of that rate rise because of these retail sales numbers being so disappointing, no?
Yeah, well, without wishing to put a downer on everything, I think we can say now that we are in stagflation, where you have, as you say, a stagnant economy, but you also have rising prices. And as you point out, that means that the Bank of England is in a cleft stick, really, because to deal with stagnant economy, you put the interest rates down. To deal with rising prices, you put interest rates up. And so they have to decide which is the more important. And I suspect, as you say, they will try to rein it in because they're too afraid of things falling apart.
Of crashing the economy. Indeed, Andrew Bailey, the Governor of the Bank of England, who we've criticised in the past, he gave a speech just yesterday in which he said he is concerned about sparking a deep recession if he and the Monetary Policy Committee, of course it's not up to him, there are 9 economists, aren't there, who vote. We're going to be hearing about a lot of those in the coming months. They're going to become well-known people emerging from the shadows, if you like. Nathan Mills, let's go back to you. You're there on the front line. You're talking to customers every day. You own and run a bunch of butchers across London. What would you say to Rishi Sunak, to Boris Johnson? What do you need to make sure that your business can survive, thrive, keep employing people, keep generating the turnover, the profits, fingers and toes crossed, that then fill the Treasury's coffers with tax revenue that the rest of us spend? What do you need, Nathan?
I think it's that cap on power supply, and I think our council rates to be reduced again, something that come in through the lockdowns and everything like that. We need support. The hospitality sector that we supply needs support. I think that's what I'd be asking for.
And is it the business rates that really hurt you, the sort of, rates you pay on the value of the property in which you work, whether you make any money or not, whether you sell a single pork chop or sausage?
If they weren't there, it'd help make the profit. That's a guarantee. I think the thing for us is the uncertainty of where we're going to be around October when we've got higher electricity bills. I think
because there's no price cap at all for businesses, is there? Let's give you the final word, Kate Nichols. I know you are running a very influential lobby group, UK Hospitality. Of course, hospitality employs about 1 in 10 British people. Are you hearing from ministers, from civil servants on the political grapevine that there could be some kind of emergency budget this summer?
We're not hearing any signs of an emergency budget. We know ministers and civil servants are working with us closely, hearing in real time the information that's coming through from businesses about what's happening to their cost base, what's happening on energy prices. We're continuing to push for solutions along the lines that Nathan talked about. We've got to give these businesses some breathing space to be able to keep prices as low as possible to consumers. Otherwise, we will be in that downward spiral. And unfortunately, I think the next 12 to 18 months could be as difficult for many businesses on the high street as the 12 to 18 months that we endured through COVID. So it's really important that we do everything we can to make sure that we don't cause a further recession. We don't have these businesses making the difficult choice between paying bills or paying their people.
Kate Nichols, CEO of UK Hospitality, always great to have you on the show with your analysis, your experience, and indeed Nathan Mills, owner of the Butchery Limited. All the best keeping your business ticking over. Thanks to all our guests today. Let's just quickly come on to some of your views. Neve got in touch with us to say UK discretionary spend will continue slumping until the cost of living crisis isn't as bad. This is the Chancellor's fault, says Neve. In Robert's view, if expenditure's way higher, there is no money left. End of. No sales, no revenue for the government. And Nick says people don't want to buy consumer products when they're worried if they can afford food and heating. Exactly right. The days of American consumerism are now dead. The purse strings will be tightened and businesses that sell non-essential goods will close. We always love to hear your views, so do keep them coming in throughout the show. Send us some good news. Can you see any light at the end of the tunnel? Is your retail business actually doing pretty well? Let us know. GBViews at gbnews.uk. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up in today's Money Talks interview, we talk to British businessman, ex-Iceland and Wix CEO Bill Grimsey. We'll be hearing his thoughts on the future of the high street after the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
Thanks, Liam. It's 1:33. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson says he's sure he'll still be Prime Minister later this year. That's despite criticism from senior members of his own party. Speaking this morning, Mr Johnson said the public want the government to get on and focus on other issues. That, as Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood said, there's an absence of discipline, focus and leadership in Downing Street. Last night, MPs ordered an investigation into whether the Prime Minister misled Parliament over COVID breaches. Boris Johnson says a new partnership agreed with India will enable the country to strengthen its own defence industry. The Prime Minister is currently in New Delhi for talks with his Indian counterpart, Narendra Modi. As part of the new deal, Mr Johnson's pledged to support India's goal of building its own fighter jets. He said the two leaders had told negotiators working on a post-Brexit trade deal to get it done by Diwali in October. The United Nations is warning the number of civilians killed in Ukraine is going to be much higher as the horrors inflicted in areas of intense fighting come to light. The organisation added there's growing evidence of war crimes and said Russian troops have indiscriminately bombed populated areas, killing civilians and wrecking hospitals. This as Boris Johnson announced the British embassy in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, will reopen next week. A German national linked to the disappearance of Madeleine McCann has been identified as a formal suspect by Portuguese authorities. Officers haven't named the individual, but in 2020, German police said they were investigating a man known as Christian B. in connection with the disappearance of the 3-year-old in Praia de Luz in May 2007. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. It's back to Liam and On the Money next. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 1:37 just, and you're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. Now, millions of young adults can't afford to buy a home, of course, but the price of renting a house or flat is also soaring. Rents outside London have climbed 10.8% over the last year and are now £1,088 a month on average, 15% higher than before the pandemic. Buy-to-let landlords, many using a single property as a pension, have taken advantage of a rising market to sell, reducing homes available for tenants to rent. At the same time, there are concerns many rental properties are substandard. No less than 13% of private rental properties across Britain pose a serious threat to the health and safety of those living there. That's a quote from a recent report by the House of Commons Public Accounts Committee. Tenants trying to challenge landlords face a court process that is, quote, inaccessible, arduous and resource intensive. That again from that cross-party committee of MPs. Joining me now on the show to discuss this is Chief Executive at the National Landlord Association, Ben Beadle, and I'm still with my regular pal here in the studio, Jasmine Birtles. Ben, great to have you on the show. What did you make of that PAC report, the Public Accounts Committee?
Yeah, I mean, clearly there's issues that need to be resolved within the sector. We're not blind to some of the issues that are there. I think landlords would look at this report and really struggle because a lot of landlords are doing a very, very good job. And that's borne out by government's own stats. 83% tenant satisfaction in the sector, higher than that in the social sector. Yet we've got these issues around the edges that make for difficult reading. And I think this dials back for us around the enforcement regime that exists in the sector and how you differentiate the good from the bad.
Of course, many landlords are, a couple who maybe are, been working for a number of years. They've got a single property they rent out. That's their pension. Yep. We've got a whole generation of people who have done that. They're generally very good landlords, but some unscrupulous landlords ruin it for everyone else, don't they? I mean, 13% of properties affecting the health and safety of the tenants is a pretty high number.
It is, and there's no getting away from that. I mean, what I would say is that the private rented sector has expanded significantly in the past 20 years. It makes up...
From about 10 to 20% of all households.
Exactly right. What I would also say is that it's now being expected to do things it was never expected or created to do. So we have lots of different types of tenants. We have families that require greater security than perhaps the private rented sector can afford. But I think we also have to look at the regime that private landlords are operating in. Remember, 94% are individuals. Half of those invest for their pension. Typically, they have one or two properties. So we're not talking property tycoons here.
No.
But what we're talking about is a lot of scrutiny on the sector. Big tax changes, greater regulation, the threat of an EPC and energy changes that's causing uncertainty to the market. And of course, landlords are looking at this and thinking, well, I'm being taxed a lot, I'm being pilloried, maybe I'm going to cash my chips in. And that is...
And then the property is no longer available for rent, but it might be available for someone to buy.
It might be. I mean, I question at the moment whether we're going to turn generation rent into generation buy.
Absolutely.
With everything else that's
going
on.
With unaffordability higher than it's ever been. The average house in the UK now costs 9 times average earnings. When I bought my first flat in the mid-90s, it was 4 times.
Yeah.
I just want to say also, Ben, we often highlight what tenants go through, the court process that's very difficult. If tenants try and ask a landlord a reasonable request, do repairs, and then they get pushed back and they get abused. But also, it's worth saying that there are lots of landlords, people with 1 or 2 properties, who have sitting on huge rent arrears because they're not being paid post-lockdown because there were rent moratoriums and lower rents and so on. What can landlords do if they're owed thousands, often tens of thousands of pounds on properties they've still got mortgages on? Because this is ruining a lot of people.
I mean, I think what I would say on this is that there's good and bad on both sides of the fence, right? And, landlords that are experiencing significant arrears will be between a rock and a hard place because they've got the mortgage to pay. They don't have a great deal of help and, frankly, they don't have a great deal of sympathy. So I think, what I would encourage landlords and tenants to do is to speak to each other. We saw landlords bend over backwards during COVID to accommodate their tenants and to try and, you know...
A lot of landlords gave rent cuts, didn't they? Quite significant rent cuts.
Absolutely.
Even though people were on furlough.
And I think this is the overriding point. You may not have expected landlords to have responded in the way that they did. But our own research commissioned by Donata found out that over 80% of tenants who asked their landlord for a gesture of some kind to sustain the tenancy during COVID got it. So we're not unreasonable people. You know, it's in our interest to keep people in their homes and to have a really good relationship. But where that breaks down, you know, we do need to look to the courts to help us out and to bring tenancies to a close, if that's the ultimate action.
What do you make of this, Jasmine?
Well, yeah, I mean, clearly we've heard that it's a two-way street. There are a lot of very good landlords, but there are some that are a problem. And I think one of the issues with quite a lot of landlords is, as you've mentioned, a lot more regulations. But at least that starts to weed out the ones that don't really want to do a proper job. So it's possible, I mean, I hate to say it, but we might need more regulation, particularly with landlords that live abroad. You know, we may need to have some sort of rules that mean that either they can't rent out a property here or they have to have a middleman, an agent, who can actually do things.
And take responsibility.
Absolutely. I think that's probably the next thing that we need.
I wonder if I might just come back on
briefly,
because I think we've got 168 pieces of regulation in the sector. This is not the Wild West, but we miss a few sheriffs, right? We need better enforcement. We need to hold bad landlords to book, but recognise that the vast majority of landlords do good by their tenant.
Ben Beadle, Chief Executive of the National Landlords Association, and indeed Jasmine Birtles of moneymagpie.com. Thanks both for joining me today. Now, it's time for my daily interview series, It's Money Talks, and today we're going to meet Bill Grimsey. He's the former CEO of the likes of Iceland and Wix. Having left school at 15, Bill Grimsby was a butcher's boy before joining Bishop's supermarket chain as a trainee manager, rising to become a director. He went on to work for Tesco before holding senior retail jobs in Hong Kong and South Africa. And after running Wix, Iceland, Booker and then Focus DIY Group back in the UK, Bill went on to write Sold Out and The Grimsey Report, which reports on the state of the UK high street. So here he is, retailing legend Bill Grimsey, my latest guest on Money Talks. Bill Grimsey, great to have you here on The Money as our latest Money Talks guest. You're a well-known figure in British retail. You're a proud Londoner. Just tell us a little bit about your career.
Well, I left school at 15, which you could in those days, because I was obsessed with shops and became a butcher's lad, joined that supermarket chain, and the rest is history, as they say. But I was very fortunate to be able to recognise that education was important. So I did all my studying, if you like, in my 20s at night school. So you don't just rise from shop boy to chief executive just because you work hard. You do have to know what you're doing as well.
And you're associated with a lot of well-known brands on the British high street in food retail and DIY as well.
Yeah, I've worked for Budgeons, Tesco, in the UK. I've worked for Park and Shop, which is the biggest supermarket chain in Hong Kong. I ran that for 5 years. And then I had the DIY experience with Wix, then Iceland, back to food, and Booker, the wholesaler. And then finally I bought Focus Do It All with a private equity provider from the States. And here's a tip. Don't buy a home improvement chain in 2007. Not smart.
We're all wise in retrospect, Bill.
Everybody,
given the financial collapse in 2008.
Everybody says to me, surely you saw that coming.
Almost no one saw it coming.
Exactly.
So you've had all these incredible experiences, but you've always been, in your bones, somebody interested in the retail experience. And you've come to prominence in your semi-retirement, as you like to call it, because you are really banging the drum for the British High Street. What is the state of the British High Street at the moment?
Well, the British High Street has a huge challenge to transition from a retail-led solution to a community hub-led solution. And what does that mean? It means that we have a lot more in our town centres other than shops. We will have health, education, entertainment, leisure, arts, crafts. And because we make them great places to go, they will also have shops. But it won't be, as it was historically, have an anchor tenant, big name, Debenhams. Well, that didn't work, did it? British Home Stores. Well, that didn't work either. So, you know, the transition from the car-born culture of the 20th century to the technology-driven culture of the 21st century requires planners to think with vision about what they should be in the future.
Certainly in many parts of the country, towns rather than cities, but even in some cities, the British High Street does seem in quite a sorry state. It seems to me like there's a perfect storm. You've obviously got the expansion of e-commerce. Then we've had, you know, a lot of financial turbulence in recent years. You talked about the 2008 financial crisis there. Then we've had lockdown. It seems like a bit of a perfect storm.
No, but the service-based economy is not history. That is the future. I mean, if we're going to get back to a economy that's got productivity in it, we're talking about technology, aren't we? We're not talking about making stuff like other third world economies where the labour intensity enables it to be done cheaply. And this is why we import stuff from China and India. We're talking about being on the leading edge of productivity. So technology, biological stuff, all that stuff. Like we were first with the vaccine, and that's where the future lies. But how do we get our local towns to be individual and not clone towns, which people like me built? We built clone towns in the 20th century, full of the same things. Why would you go to town A as opposed to town B? But in 21st century, that's the fun bit. We will have towns that have brands, their own brands. You go to York because, and it's easy because York, we know what's in York, but you'll go to Halifax because, or you'll go to Bicester because. And so these becauses are brands, and they're based on heritage. So we're blessed with a massive heritage, and we're blessed with communities that will live, work, play in those places, and people who will visit because they're a great place to go, and they're different, and they have a unique selling proposition, and they're marketed by the local authority accordingly, and they'll create economies in their own right. So the key is towns need to compete with towns for the economy to grow. And that's what I've been advocating for the last 10 years. So forget shops. They are going to still be there, but they're not going to be the real driver. And so I say that, I put it like this. Imagine 1,500 Disney Worlds in the UK. I don't mean theme parks, but I mean places of interest, places of attraction, places with experiences that are based on their local heritage, that are all different. And we can do that. And it's staring us in the face. And does that sound like utopia? No. Because there are towns that have listened in this last 10 years that are already doing it. And one of those is in the worst place economically in England, called Stockton-on-Tees. And it is transforming the place.
Railway ground zero.
As we say, yeah, but here's what they've done. 2 shopping centres, the local authority bought both, they moving retailers from the not so good one into the good, better one. So it's now full rather than both half empty. And they sell that back to the private sector to run, and they're blowing the other one up. And they're opening the Tees, the river, up to the town centre with a green park. Now, the guy that did it, Neil Schneider, as chief executive, he's now retiring himself. But he said to justify it, there's no IRR here. There's no rate of
internal
return.
Rate of return.
Exactly.
This is not necessarily a financial decision. There's other stuff going on.
And he said, you can't afford not to do this because it will create the place that we can then build the economy on. And he's right.
It's stuff that will eventually reap a financial return, but it's intangible stuff at the beginning. You can't put in a spreadsheet. It doesn't make business sense unless you have the leap of imagination.
At the end of the month, I'm going up to York to speak up at York for an active group to stop the council building a 350 multi-storey car park in York in a nice bit of land. We will be carless in our town centres by 2050. So just because that car park right now shows a 4 or 5 year good rate of return, blah, blah, it's not what you need in 10, 15, 20 years' time. So rethink the whole thing and don't just look at individual projects. So, you know, it's a real challenge for our local authorities. And of course, that brings you back to what is the main thing government have got to do, and that's change the leadership out there because they're not good enough.
So you want devolved mayors, you want a lot of local leadership empowered to make these big local planning decisions that really shape communities and local economies going forward, because local people will know better what their community needs, what their town needs, than someone sitting in Whitehall.
Exactly right. We need to decentralise, we need to give people ownership of their own places, and we need people to lead that have got the experience to run a brand. So Dave Lewis, who did a fantastic job at Tesco, I don't know where he is now, but he would make a fantastic mayor. Because we need to create these places to compete with each other and get the economy moving around that basis.
Let's talk about where we are now, and we'll go back to where we're going, Bill. Where we are now, do you think the British government needs to impose some kind of e-commerce tax? So local physical retailers, bricks and mortar retailers, have more of a chance to compete with the big online commercial giants?
Well, this may surprise you, but no, I don't. I don't think it's the role of governments to interfere with markets. I'll give you a little example. When we went out of town, and I was a big protagonist of that in the 70s and 80s, I was the new store development director of Tesco in the 80s. I was opening 25 superstores a year, all out of town. We were doing it because the land was cheap, the rates were cheap per square foot. We could get big stores, we could get big free car parking. No, that decimated the town centres, and nobody said you've got to have an out-of-town tax to help the poor retailers in the town. And now bricks and mortar retailers are getting caned by Amazon. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, because their business model is a good model and it works. Government shouldn't interfere with that. What they should do is look at how the town centres, and particularly the independent business sector, which is massive in this country, is faring following this pandemic.
Well, Bill, it's been really interesting to talk to you. Thanks a lot for being my latest guest on Money Talks.
Pleasure. Nice. Thank you very much.
And that was UK retailing legend Bill Grimsey, and you can listen to the full 25-minute version of that interview, plus dozens of other extended Money Talks encounters on my Money Talks podcast on the GB News YouTube channel or via the GB News app. Check it out. You won't regret it. That's all we've got time for today. Thanks for joining me here on The Money. I'll be back on Monday at 1 p.m, continuing to focus on the cost of living crisis, helping you to beat the squeeze. Have a great weekend, and thanks for joining me, because this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On The Money.
Hello there, welcome to your weather update from the Met Office. I'm Claire Nazir. Here are your headlines through the rest of today. Still that nagging easterly wind, a few showers lurking around. Brightest skies will be towards the north. We're stuck between high pressure across Iceland and low pressure lurking across Iberia as well as France. A squeeze on the isobars, meaning we're seeing that easterly wind come in over a cool sea, hence the reason why it's going to feel cool yet again along this east coast. More clouds across central and southern parts of England and Wales through the afternoon, a few showers here. More low cloud burning back to the coast across the northeast of Scotland, but in between, it's fine, it's dry, with some lovely sunshine. Highest temperatures the western side of the country coming in around 17 or 18 degrees Celsius. Now through this evening and overnight, not a lot of change. This cloud tends to fade away towards more southern areas. More cloud then comes in across Northumberland, Pennine districts, as well as the Midlands, southeast Scotland. And that low cloud, that HARG, continues to affect the far northeast of Scotland. A mostly dry night, but one or two spits and spots can't be ruled out where that cloud is thick enough, and temperatures holding up because of the wind. So the weekend looks like this. A rather cloudy start for some. Again, a few showers where that cloud slowly develops and becomes thicker. But towards the west, brighter skies, certainly for Northern Ireland and Western Scotland. And we will see the cloud break up through the afternoon, allowing some sunshine. The winds are still very brisk coming in from the east-northeast. Temperatures typically coming in around 17 or 18 further west, further east, 12 to 14 degrees Celsius. It's a similar situation through Saturday and into Sunday. Again, we're chasing cloud, temperatures just about holding up. And again, that wind will be strong at times. So here's your outlook through the next few days. Sunday's looking mostly fine with some sunshine. Monday more in the way of clouds, but the temperatures will slowly decline as we head through next week. I'll see you later. Bye-bye for now.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot.